And hello, everybody. Just checking. Yep, we should be live now. Hey, people. So today we'll be back at it again. Let me just minimize some of my other screens here. I really need to get like one of those two monitor things. Anyway, howdy everybody. We're back at it again. Going through Gurdjieff's Beelzebub's Tales to his grandson. We're up to chapter 25. The very saintly Ashieta Shaimash, sent from above to the earth. Now, if anybody wants to help out, support the channel, help with this process that we're all going through, you can help out by giving a one-time donation via PayPal or subscribing to the Ko-fi account, or even there's a YouTube membership. Or even I think there's like YouTube supers and stuff you can give in chat here anyway. But yeah, let's just hop right into it. Before I start, I'll mention, of course, the site, Gurdjieff.thework. At this site, you can scroll down to the bottom, click on primary text, and you can download the PDF that I'm using right here. So page 408, chapter 25. Let's just jump right into it. So Beelzebub was talking about this guy, his last descent to the planet Earth, and then he wants to talk about an actual teacher that made a difference. So this guy, he mentions certain people like the Buddha or Buddhism and Christianity, but here Gurdjieff or Beelzebub, Gurdjieff through Beelzebub mentions this enigmatic figure who we don't really know who it is, Ashieta Shaimash. Apparently there's something like in Old Persian this means something like ray of golden sunlight or whatever. But Ashieta Shaimash is a very enigmatic figure. I've mentioned it before in other live streams, but keep an eye out for this guy, and he may or may not be some kind of cognate or for Zarathustra, or maybe he's an amalgamation of multiple people. Nonetheless, let's see what Beelzebub says. Let's see what Beelzebub says. So starting off, and so my boy, yep, and starting off grand with an "and so my boy" right off the bat. Okay. Now listen very attentively to the information concerning the most very saintly, now already common cosmic individual, Ashieta Shaimash. Common cosmic individual, that's an interesting statement, because, you know, when he talks about God, he doesn't say God, he says our sovereign endlessness, or common cosmic sovereign endlessness, or eternal individual, or something. He doesn't use individual. He says something like that. And so to say common cosmic individual when referring to another being that's not the creator, it means this being is very high ranks, but also what common cosmic? What does that mean? It means he is common all over the cosmos. He has differentiated himself, that his consciousness permeates the entire cosmos. It's also weird etymologically. Common, what does common mean? And also cosmic, cosmos, is order itself. So he's ordered that which is common to him, or that which we all have in common. He is actually ordered, and that's what makes him a true individual. But nonetheless, Ashieta Shaimash, and his activities connected with the existence of the three-brained beings arising and existing on that planet Earth, which he has taken to your fancy. So Beelzebub is talking to his grandson here. We have taken the fancy of Beelzebub's grandson, Hassien. We capture his mind with our oddities. I have already more than once told you that by all most gracious command of our omni-loving common father, endlessness, our cosmic highest, most very saintly individuals sometimes actualize within the presence of some terrestrial three-brained being. Pardon me. A definitized conception of a sacred individual, in order that he, having become a terrestrial being with such a presence, may there on the spot orient himself and give to the process of their ordinary being existence such a corresponding new direction. So this is interesting. He's saying there are beings that have already actualized, or that have already reached a very high degree, but they can basically well, incarnate, or they can go to a planet and coat themselves with a being body. That's the same as all the other terrestrial beings on that planet. And then because there's this weird thing, their being is, developed, but they're in this weird being body, and so they need to orient themselves to then express their being properly. And in doing so, everyone else goes, "Hey, wait, what's that guy over there doing?" And it kind of gives a new orientation to all the other beings. So, in other words, a master can incarnate and then just do what he does, and in doing that, it can inspire other people. So where were we? Orient himself to give the process of the ordinary being existence such a corresponding new direction, thanks to which the already crystallized consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer, as well as the predispositions as such new crystallizations, might perhaps be removed from their presences. So that's the main reason he's doing it, that this new direction may remove those crystallized consequences of the Kundabuffer organ. Whew. It was 7 centuries before the Babylonian events I have spoken of that there was actualized in the planetary body of a three-brain being there a definitized conception of a sacred individual named Ashyat Shaimash. This is interesting. So the being body would have been raised by a mother and a father, would have been given its own name, but internally it has a being name. Ashyata Shayamash. So this is the being name of someone, so it may not be something recorded in history. It may be, I don't know, the Akashic records or whatever those Sulianos tapes, or what were they called? Oh man, I gotta read chapter 23 again. Anyway, who became there in his turn a messenger from above, and who is now already one of the highest, most very saintly, common, cosmic, sacred individuals. Ashyata Shaimash had his conception in the planetary body of a boy of a poor family, descended from what is called the Sumerian race. Very interesting. So also it's always a boy of a poor family. There's this interesting contrast of the lowest also being the highest, or the first also being the last, and the last being the first. So the poorest family has literally the highest being in almost all of the universe incarnating into it. And he's of the Sumerian race. So he says this. So what is this? This is before Babylon. It's after Atlantis. Is it recorded history? Well, it's after Tikliamish, but it's still before Babylon. So Sumerian race, also very interesting as well. Does it mean he's someone from Ur? Remember, Abraham was from Ur. Even there's some interesting Egyptian stuff that clearly also comes from Babylon. What was that thing also about Pythagoras? They found Pythagoras' theorem in Babylon somewhere as well, like on a Babylonian statue. So all of our mysteries, in one way or another, descend from Babylon, but where did Babylon get it from? Anyway, in a small place, then called Pascana, okay, situated not far from Babylon, so not the Babylon that we remember, but a very early iteration, he grew up and became a responsible being, partly in this small place and partly in Babylon itself, which was at that time, although not yet magnificent, already a famous city. The very saintly Ashyata Shaimash was the only messenger sent from above to your planet who succeeded by his holy labors in creating on that planet conditions in which the existence of its unfortunate beings somewhat resembled for a certain time the existence of the three-brained beings of the other planets of our great universe. So he actually made some results. Whether it be from like one being to another, or it seems like he's giving him this description as in, it's not just that Ashyata Shaimash helped a single being and made a lineage, but Ashyata Shaimash actually created like a society, like a city of individuals returned, or maybe even had a planetary impact, but nonetheless, he was the only one that was successful on a reasonably large scale, it seems. So in the existence of the unfortunate beings somewhat resembled for a certain time the existence of three-brained beings of the other planets of our great universe, on which beings exist with the same possibilities, and he was also the first on the planet Earth who, for the mission pre-assigned to him, refused to employ, for the three-brained beings of that planet, ordinary methods, which had been established during centuries by all the other messengers from above. The very saintly Ashyata Shaimash taught nothing whatever to the ordinary three-brained beings of Earth, nor did he preach anything to them. So that's interesting. He taught nothing, and he preached nothing, as was done before and after him by the messengers sent from above with the same aim. Tyler says, sounds like the movie La Belle Verte. The hell is that? Band. Oh, beautiful girl. Oh, okay. Is this a paradise? Someone makes a paradise? French? Of course it's French. It was also composed original music. So, okay, visit to a green garden, La Belle Verte, synopsis, on a beautiful green utopian planet much smaller than Earth. Interesting. Okay, I'll check this out later. Thank you, Tyler. And in consequence, chiefly of this, none of his teachings passed in any form from his contemporaries, even to the third generation of ordinary beings there, not to mention the contemporary ordinary beings there. So that's interesting. He had some kind of teachings that were not taught or preached, but they nonetheless had the effect of removing the effects of the Kundabuffer organ, but also they were never perpetuated, at least properly, from one generation to the next. So how, yeah, there's an interesting contradiction here. How did they get passed on then? How did you find out about this, Gurdjieff? What are you trying to do, Gurdjieff? So, definite information relating to his very saintly activities passed from generation to generation, from the contemporaries of the very saintly Ashyata Shaimash, to the beings of the following generations, through those called their initiates, by means of a certain what is called legominism, of his deliberations under the title of The Terror of the Situation. So this is interesting. So, legominism, one's a hard one to pronounce. Why does he say Lego? He should have said logo and been like logos or something, but I don't know, maybe that would invoke too much of the word. But this is, I think you can look this up. I think he explains it later, but this is basically a method that occult schools use to transmit wisdom that appear from the outside to be teaching something completely different, or to be doing something completely different. So if you think of the idea of like the tarot, one of the ideas of the tarot is that it contains this, this deep hermetic teaching, but they were also used as gambling. However, this idea is that's deliberate. The masters wanted a way to preserve their teachings, and so they wanted to preserve it in something that was infinite and perpetual, and one of the things that is infinite and perpetual and will always be here will be man's greed. Man's greed and vice. So by hiding it in a game of gambling, they were able to perpetuate these symbols that have hermetic meanings encoded in them. So basically, this is how Ashyata Shaimash taught, not that he made the tarot, that Gurdjieff is saying that, but Gurdjieff is saying he used an odd kind of method, which from the outside would look like he's teaching something different, but it actually has a specific effect and utility in this other way. And he called it, the title of it was called The Terror of the Situation. That's really interesting, because, you hear like namby-pamby-lovey, living in the moment New Age people talking about, just be in the moment, man. And he says, no, don't just be in the moment. You have to apprehend the terror of the situation. That sounds much more vital. That sounds much more accurate than just live in the moment. Now, in addition to this, there has survived from the period of his very saintly activities, and there still exists, even till now, one of several what are called marble tablets. So he says marble, not emerald. So, I mean, it could be, once again, Ashyata Shaimash, is he Zarathustra? Is he like a combo of multiple different people? Marble tablets, emerald tablets? Maybe a little bit of Zarathustra, maybe a little bit of Hermes Trismegistus. So what are called marble tablets. So these marble tablets contain some of his teachings, on which were engraved his counsels and commandments and sayings to the beings contemporary with him. And at the present time, this surviving tablet is the chief sacred relic of a small group of initiated beings there, called the Brotherhood of Olbogmek. I guarantee if I Google this, it's only going to come up with Gurdjieff links. Whose place of existence is situated in the middle of the continent of Asia. So he says there's a surviving small brotherhood. It's interesting. So in Asia somewhere, in the middle of Asia, there's a small brotherhood that preserves these teachings of Ashyata Shaimash on a tablet. The name Olbogmek means there are no different religions, there is only one God. Okay, so it's some kind of perennialist brotherhood somewhere in the middle of Asia. When I was personally on the surface of your planet for the last time, I happened by chance to become acquainted with the legomenism, that word, which transmits to the initiated men beings of the planet Earth of remote generations these deliberations of the saintly Ashyata Shaimash under the title of the terror of the situation. The legomenism, yeah, that's how you pronounce that, was of great assistance to me in elucidating certain strange aspects of the psyche of these peculiar beings. Just those strange aspects of their psyche which, with all my careful observations of them during tens of centuries, I had previously been unable to understand in any way whatsoever. So Gurdjieff had a really hard time understanding the mentation of the three-brained beings of our planet Earth, but with the help of Ashyata Shaimash's legomenisms, he got a little help. My dear beloved grandfather, tell me, please, what does the word legomenism mean? Hassian asked. Finally, someone else besides Beelzebub gets to talk. So, this word, legomenism, replied Beelzebub, is given to one of the means existing there of transmitting from generation to generation information about certain events of long past ages through just those three-brained beings who are thought worthy to be and who are called initiates. This means of transmitting information from generation to generation had been devised by the beings of the continent Atlantis. For your better understanding of the said means of transmitting information of beings of succeeding generations by means of a legomenism, I must here explain to you a little also about those beings there whom other beings call initiates. Okay, so he's getting to explain it. So it's a technique from Atlantis. In former times, there on the planet Earth, this word was always used in one sense only. So he's talking about the word initiate. And the three-brained beings there who were called initiates were those who had acquired in their presences almost equal objective data, which could be sensed by other beings. So they had a kind of objective consciousness. So there may be people who were living subjectively, but an initiate had a kind of objective consciousness, and there were other initiates who also had pretty much the same objective data, and they could compare properly without any subjectivity getting in the way. But during the last 2 centuries, this word has come to be used there now in 2 senses. In one sense, it is used for the same purpose as before, that is to say, those beings there are so named who became initiates, thanks to their personal conscious labors and intentional sufferings, great, and thereby, as I have already told you, they acquired in themselves objective merits, which can be sensed by other beings irrespective of brain system, and which also evoke in others trust and respect. So there are apparently some people who still use initiate this way, or this is what an initiate is supposed to be, is this person who has attained through effort, and the objective merits inside them are sensed by other beings irrespective of brain systems, so even animals react to initiates differently, and which also evoke in others trust and respect. In the other sense, those beings call each other by this name who belong to those what are called their criminal gangs, which in the said period have greatly multiplied there, and whose members have as their chief aim to steal from those around them only essence values. So does he mean criminal organizations like the mafia, or does he mean criminal organizations like cults? Under the pretense of following supernatural or mystic sciences, these criminal gangs there are really occupied and very successful with this kind of plunder. So it seems like he's talking about the creation of cults. And so any and every genuine member of such a gang there is called an initiate. There are even great initiates among these terrestrial initiates, and these great initiates, especially at present time, are made out of those ordinary initiates of new formation, who in their virtuoso affairs pass, as is said there, through fire, water, copper pipes, and even through all the roulette halls of Monte Carlo. That's a funny statement, actually. They pass through fire, they walk on water, they can walk through walls, and they can even walk through the roulette halls. So they claim to have mystical powers, but really they gamble and they sin. That's a very funny sentence there. Oh, this is dark occultism. But yeah, it seems that he's talking about this kind of. It's more like people taking stealing essence values. Yeah, I guess you could call it that way, almost like psychic vampires. Well then, my boy, legomenism is the name given to the successive transmission of information about long past events which have occurred on the planet Earth from initiates to initiates of the first kind. That is, from really meritorious beings who have themselves received their information from similar meritorious beings. For having invented this means of so he still hasn't kind of told you what it is, it's just how initiates talk to each other through time. For having invented this means of transmitting information, we must give the beings of the continent Atlantis their due. So not only that, it's not only a unique form of transmission, it's unique to Earth, and it also impresses the beings from other planets. Like, beings from other planets don't use legomenisms. They don't have memes. We seem weird to them, but at the same time, it's like, oh wow, they did something new. Because, like Hassien didn't know what it meant. He had to get an explanation from it from Beelzebub. This means was intended very wise, and did indeed attain their aim. This is the sole means by which information about certain events that proceeded in times long past has accurately reached the beings of remote later generations. As for the information which passed from generation to generation through the ordinary mass of beings of that planet, it has either completely disappeared, having been soon forgotten, or there remains of it, as our dear Mullah Nasruddin expresses, only the tail and mane and food for Shehrazad. Tail and mane. So as in, the beast has been eaten and all that's left is the tail and the mane? And the food for Shehrazad, so maybe the organs or something, but all the meat and bones are gone? And Shehrazad in this case is a storyteller. Very interesting. So our histories all become corrupt. And it's that thing that's the whole thing about the Taro, in the sense it's supposed to be this mimetic way of packaging knowledge so that it doesn't get corrupted. And it's like, why would you package it mimetically? Why don't you just tell people how it is? And it's like, yeah, language changes over time. Things change and permeate through times. Misunderstandings arise. And like, this is even before you get people who intentionally change things for their own purposes, whether they be malicious or well-intentioned. It's like, even before maliciousness enters the game, there's already people misunderstanding things. So it's like, why don't you skip all of that and package the information in a kind of mimetic way that only those of a certain level or of a certain mentation or who have certain training can decode themselves, that assures the perpetuation of that knowledge. Or this is the idea. Hence, it is that when a few scraps of information about some event or other do happen to reach the beings of remote later generations and the learned beings of a new formation, they concoct their hodgepodge out of these L scraps, maybe leftover scraps? I guess the word's missing there in the PDF. There then occurs a most peculiar and most instructive phenomenon. Namely, when the cockroaches there chance to hear what is in this hodgepodge, the evil spirit of Saint Vitus existing there immediately enters their common presences and begins to rage quite merrily. What? That's an enigmatic paragraph there. I'm not going to decode that one. We can all reflect on that. Arcanum stays the same over time, says Tyler. Yeah, exactly. It's an arcanum. It's not a sign. A sign has a meaning. It's an arcanum and a sign or a symbol are different things. These are arcane symbols, not arcane signs. Now, how the contemporary learned beings of the planet Earth concoct their hodgepodge from scraps of information which reach them is very well defined in one of the wise sentences of our dear Mullah Nasser Eddin, which consists of the following words: "A flea exists in the world just for one thing, that when it sneezes that the deluge should occur, with the description of which our learned beings love so much to busy themselves." That's another enigmatic statement. A flea, is this like a butterfly flaps its wings and causes a tornado on the other side of the world? A flea sneezes and causes the deluge to occur. But then he adds on with the description of which our learned beings love so much to busy themselves. So they all talk about it, but in the end, the thing that causes it is the smallest of things. I must tell you that when I used to exist among your favorites, it was always difficult for me to refrain, as your favorites say, from laughter when one or another of the learned beings there delivered a lecture or related to me personally about some past events of which I had myself been an eyewitness. These lectures or stories there are crammed with fictions so absurd that even if our arch-cunning Lucifer or his assistants tried to invent them, they could not succeed. So man's ludicrousness is far more potent than you could ever imagine. Very interesting, very interesting. So that was that chapter. We've got heaps of time left, so we may as well jump into the next one. Hopefully it's not too long. So we're going to learn more about the legomenism. God damn it, this word. Concerning the deliberations of the very saintly Ashiata Shaimash under the title of The Terror of the Situation. So this is his teaching, Ashiata Shaimash, and we're gonna finally get his take on it all. Was I gonna say something about all this? Yeah, I was gonna say something about this again is another demonstration of how we should act with laughter. This is a description of that third, is it the second force? The ability to accept the unpleasant manifestations of our fellow man. What does that mean? Like in practice, how do you stop being offended? It's like you can't stop the reaction. There needs to be some kind of reaction. You don't just want to pacify yourself and become a blank slate. Otherwise, you're just suppressing things. What do you do to transmute it, to transform it? In the end, it's laughter. Like when someone comes up to you and tells you something wrong, our reaction is always like, oh, that's not how it is. Oh, what is this guy? No, and that can create more conflict. But in the end, Beelzebub, externally may be passive and may nod and be like, oh, that's very wise. But internally, he's laughing. He's laughing his ass off. And it's this ability to laugh that is the crystallization of that second force. He has the capacity to accept all of man's unplanet manifestations in this way, through that one technique. Now, chapter 26, let's just jump into it. The legomenism. You just want to keep throwing this word out. Beelzebub continued to speak, through which the deliberations of the very saintly Ashiata Shaimash were transmitted had the following contents. It began with the prayer. So this is Beelzebub speaking a prayer, which may be a story. In the name of the causes of my arising, I shall always strive to be just towards every already spiritualized origination, and towards all the originations of the future spiritualized manifestations of our common creator, almighty autocrat endlessness. Amen. So I think this continues here. What is it? Tyler says, Devil card in Crowley's Tower of Smoking Goat. Yeah. Well, maybe. To me a trifling particle of the whole of the great whole, it was commanded from above to be coated with the planetary body of a three-scented being of this planet, and to assist all other such beings arising and existing upon it to free themselves from the consequences of the properties of the organ, which for great and important reasons has actualized in the presences of their ancestors. All the sacred individuals here before me, specially and intentionally actualized from above, have always endeavored, while striving for the same aim, to accomplish the task laid upon them through one or other of those three sacred ways for self-perfecting, foreordained by our endless Creator himself, namely through the sacred ways based on the being impulses called faith, hope, and love. So these are faith, hope, and love. This is interesting. These are being impulses, which we find preserved and come to us. They were preserved and encapsulated and taken by the Christian tradition, and mainly through that tradition they arrive to us now in our contemporary time. But what do the actual being impulses mean, and how are they expressed nowadays is the question. When I completed my 7th year, I began, as commanded from above, to prepare my planetary body in order, during my responsible existence, to be able to be impartial. At this period of my self-preparation, I had the intention, upon reaching responsible age, of carrying out the task laid upon me, through one or other of the said three sacred being impulses, also. Okay, one or the other being impulses. Interesting. So, as this period of my self-preparation, so this is a being has incarnated into a human planetary body, and he then goes through a period of self-preparation. I had the intention of, upon reaching the responsible age, so he, as a child, he was seemingly a normalish human child, maybe a little bit odd, but then he reached the responsible age of carrying out the task laid upon me. So he reached, maybe 18, 20 years old. But when, during this period of my self-preparation, I chanced to meet many beings of almost all types formed and existing here in the city of Babylon, and when during my impartial observations I constated many traits of their being manifestations, there crept into me and progressively increased an essence doubt as to the possibilities of saving the three-scented beings of this planet by means of these three sacred ways. So the three being impulses of faith, hope, and love can redeem us, but there's something he realized when studying the people in Babylon. They were manifesting certain things in him that was like, I don't think it's going to be enough, just these three things. And he had a doubt in him, not a reasoned doubt, but deep in his essence, he knew it wasn't going to be enough. The different manifestations of the beings I then encountered, which increased my doubts, gradually convinced me that these consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer, having passed by hereditary through a series of generations over a long period of time. So by the way, this is Gurdjieff talking through Beelzebub, and Beelzebub is now saying a story of Ashiata Shayamash, but from the first person, had ultimately so crystallized in their presences that they now reached contemporary beings already as a lawful part of their essence. At least I think so. And hence crystallized consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer are now, as it were, a second nature of their common presences. So the consequences of the Kunabata. So not the Kunabata organ itself, we don't all have tails, but the consequences of it are second nature to us. They're a part of our consciousness. So when I finally became a responsible being, I decided that before making my choice among the mentioned sacred ways, I should bring my planetary body into the state of the sacred Ksherknara. Ksherknara. Kshernkara. Okay, that's good enough. That's good enough. Moving on. That is into the state of all-brained, balanced being perceptiveness. Okay. And only when already in that state to choose the way for my further activities. Okay. This is big. Let's sit here for a little bit. All-brained being perceptiveness. So before he did anything, before he did alchemy, astrotheurgy, before he studied or did all of these internal processes and things like that, the first thing he did is take his planetary body. So he didn't work with the mind or emotions or other dimensions or unlock gene keys or any of that like bullshit. He didn't do any channeling. The first thing he did is he obtained all-brained, balanced being perceptiveness. So, in Gurdjieff's teachings, Gurdjieff talks about the 7 types of men, and he says there are 3 types of men, 1, 2, and 3. And they just pretend they're all the same circle. I've got a bad drawer. 1 is the instinctual motor person. Let's just go M for motor. 1 is the emotional person. 1's the intellectual person. And these people are not necessarily one above the other. They all have the same problems. The motor instinctual person acts and lives through the motor instinctive center primarily. The emotional center person works through their emotions primarily. The intellectual person works through their intellect primarily. All 3 of these individuals have an emotion, an intellect, and a motor instinctual center, but you can tell the difference between them, I like to say, by 1, their likes, and by 2, how they solve their problems. So an intellectual person, when things run into trouble, when they get into trouble, they will always try to solve things in an intellectual way. You know, doing your taxes, you got to be intellectual. In a relationship, when your partner's scaring, like yelling at you, the intellectual person's like, but honey, those are just the facts. And they just keep being reasoning. They don't enter their emotions. Whereas an emotional person is great in a relationship, and then when they try to do their taxes, they break into tears and then emotionally manipulate someone into doing it for them. A motor-centered person, great, fantastic. And a motor-centered person, they want to build a garden. They want to make a little herb garden for themselves, get healthy. So they just go outside and start digging. They do it. Whereas an intellectual person will think about that and be like, yeah, I should get healthy, make a herb garden outside. They look online, they look at a bunch of projects, they look at the right soil, they look at what herbs to get, what herbs work together and months pass and they never do it. The motor person gets stuff done. How does the motor person solve problems? Someone yelling at them, they don't solve it emotionally, they just get their fist, move it forwards, and they solve their relationship problems like that. Motor emotional instinct. There are 3 types of people. You can see who's who by how they solve their problems and also potentially likes. Intellectual person. Have you heard the latest scientific finding? Or I just finished a Sudoku puzzle. Emotional person. Did you see the latest episode of oh my god, did you hear about Khloe Kardashian? I don't even know everything I know about the Kardashians I have learnt against my will. A motor center person. Motor can be they play sports or also observing the movements of the body is pleasurable for them. So even people who like to watch dancing or watch fighting or a motor center person doesn't necessarily have to be a buff guy. It can also be, the dude with a big beer belly who's just like watching the Olympics and that the person in the Olympics, maybe a motor-centered person, ice skating and doing an amazing triple flip, and then they miss it on the way down, and then the guy watching them on the TV with the beer in the hand and the big belly is just like, what an idiot. Like, both those people can be motor-centered people. The problem is whether it be Motor, emotion, or intellect is not a good place to be in. You want to be a man 5, a man 5, a man 6, or a man 7. And these are progressive at this point. So how do you get to be a man 5? Obviously, you need to become a man 4. How do you become a man 4? Man 4 is the balanced man. Man number 4, if you ever meet a number man 4, one of the traits of a man number 4 is they have no problems. Or, better to say, they don't necessarily have no problems, but they're in a position, always in a position to solve their problems. Why? If they have a relationship problem, an emotional problem, they have the capacity to solve it. If they have a motor problem, they have the capacity to solve it. If they have an intellectual problem, they can solve it. Easy. Why? Because they are balanced in all of their centers. The appropriate center activates for the appropriate situation in life. They are a balanced individual. So all brain being perceptiveness, when they achieve perceptions, the proper cylinder or center activates and receives it. There's no subjective element that sends it to the wrong cylinder, and there's no misinterpretation. This is the first step. You can't get, it's all successive. Oh, where am I going? You can't get to number 5 without passing through number 4. You can't be an intellectual person and rationalize yourself into directly to a man number 7. You can't be an emotional person and feel yourself into a man number 6 or something. You have to balance yourself in some way. So an emotional person will have to study something, and an intellectual person will have to become emotional and even develop their motor center. This is why you see things in traditions, like even Plato will say a proper man who is educated has 3 things. A proper man is educated in 3 ways. He has the proper education. He knows philosophy, he knows music, and he knows how to wrestle. Like, that was Plato's thing. It's like wrestling, motor center, music, emotional center, philosophy, intellectual center, balanced man. And you think of that, even this continued through times, even up until like the medieval era. There's like the Spanish sword masters who are also poets and things like that. There are all these like individuals you see through history who this is the balanced man. They've balanced themselves. And from there, they can kind of intuit higher things, or higher things may come to them, or they're in a perspective or a situation where they can then move into higher things. But if you try to force yourself to go into a higher thing without balancing first, there is a chance that, well, for one, nothing may happen, and that's that's not the most likely, but that's the best possible outcome, because if something does happen and you do achieve something, you do contact something, you do gain a higher energy, and you are unbalanced, you are dysfunctional, what's more or a higher voltage of energy going to do if you are dysfunctional? It's going to make you more dysfunctional. If you're schizophrenic, it'll make you more schizophrenic. If you're a little bit crazy, it'll make you more crazy. So it's being balanced is the first thing you should kind of aim for. Well, Luna says, so would man 4 be the intuitive? An intuitive individual, you could say intuition would definitely be one of the attributes of a man number 4. I'd say with man number 4 as well, there's like the 2 types of man number 4. So, there's man number 1, 2, and 3, motor, emotional, intellectual. But with the man number 4, it's like really, there's a long period before man number 5. And on one end, there is the balanced man, and on the other end, there is someone who they may not be permanently connected to their higher cylinders, but they have had flashes and experiences of those higher cylinders. So the higher, in Gurdjieff's concept, he talks about the higher mental and higher emotional cylinders, which really are what? It's the active intellect. It's the higher genius. It's the perfect nature. In different traditions, they extrapolate this into an external thing, and they call it the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel. This is a more kind of endpoint. Someone who gets there is closer to man number 5 than just a man number 4 at the beginning as the person who can solve all of his problems. He's integrated himself and he's balanced. And then there's the man at the end of man number 4 who's about to reach a man number... Man, this is so freaking messy. I got to get better at drawing. The man at the end of number 4, who's almost a man number 5, is that person who's had flashes of the higher cylinders. He's not quite connected there permanently, but he's experienced the higher cylinders. He knows what the high cylinders is, and that can be that intuitive nature. That can be an intuitive impulse. Random intuitive impulses and spontaneous visions could be kind of signs that, it's that... If you've studied kind of Goethe, or In Search of the Miraculous, there's that one chapter where Ouspensky talks about A influences, B influences, and C influences. What's the one? It's like you get influences from the world, and then there are influences from the other world, and then there are influences from the other world that come to you through a secondary cause, and that's the B influence. And so a man number 4 at the end is someone who can gain those influences from beyond the veil, and those are those spontaneous visions and intuitional impulses. So he's close to a man number 5. But anyway, so this is what Ashyata Shayamash did. He was a normal human, or he incarnated into a normal human being body, a poor boy, nobody loves me, from a poor family, and he basically developed himself. And how did he develop himself? The first thing, he kind of studied a whole bunch of different people and then realized, I don't think this is going to be enough. And so the first thing he did is he balanced himself. He became a man number 4. He raised himself up to Ksherknara, which is a level of being, this level of being, or this degree of development. And only when already in that state to choose the way for my further activities. So it could be that you go into some further activity. It could be that maybe you do take a kind of more intellective path, like a meditative, contemplative, jnana yoga path. Or maybe you do take a devotional path, a bhakti yoga, something more mystical path, or maybe a path of action and vitality. But you don't choose that path first. First, you balance yourself, and then you choose the path for your further activity. So, with this aim, I then ascended the mountain Vezinyama. So he ascends a mountain. This is very, it's that, like, that traditional, that kind of, or masters going to the mountain and contemplating. And so Goethe gives a name here, so this may have some significance. There may be something in the oral fourth way traditions that talks about this mountain. Maybe it's Mount Kailash, perhaps. We shall see. Where for 40 days and 40 nights I knelt on my knees and devoted myself to concentration. So after becoming... So he didn't do like some hardcore Raja yoga at first. First thing he did is he balanced himself. Then he did some hardcore Raja yoga and did a 40-day concentration, or he collected himself. A second 40 days and nights, I neither ate nor drank, but recalled and analyzed all the impressions present in me of all the perceptions I had acquired during my existence. So he recapitulated. If you're into Carlos Castaneda, he did a recapitulation of his entire life during the period of my self-preparation. Yeah. Third 40 days and 40 nights, so 120 days all up. Pretty based. I knelt at my knees and also neither ate nor drank, and every half hour I plucked 2 hairs from my breast. I think this is a symbolic saying for something, but anyway. And only when thereafter I had already attained complete freedom from all the bodily and spiritual associations of the impressions of ordinary life. So he is liberated from the sensations and impressions. So one of the problems with sensations and impressions that happens in us is when we gain a perception, we judge it good or bad. Like you smell a rose and you go, oh, that's nice. Or you look at, there's dog poop on the ground, you're like, oh, you smell it, you're like, oh God, what's that? What's dog poop? Ooh. The problem is it's not about like not saying good or bad. Its problem is that perception, that categorization and your perception of it happens instantaneously, whether you like it or not. And this happens with everything we experience in our lives. When we approach someone and meet them for the first time, or when someone says something, we react to it. Really, it's only in hindsight that we're able to see these things. So to be in the moment and be bracketed away from that is impossible for a normal person. But what normal people can change through hindsight. But what he's doing here is he's going through his life, invoking all of those things like, remember that time that happened? You remember that thing that happened to you in school? Oh, cringe. No, he's looking at that thing that happened to you in high school, and he's not cringing to it. He's purifying all of those things. So that perception of it and the forced categorization of it, he's separating those two things. He's purifying the perceptions so they're just there. He's just looking at them. His natural reaction is absent from all of them. And so then what is he? What are you without your reactions? In the end, he's making himself one thing. And all of these reactions, I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm hungry, all of those things are bracketed. They're not him. He's becoming one thing, independent. He's becoming an individual. I began to meditate how to be. So very interesting. Let me read again. Only when thereafter I had finally attained complete freedom from all the bodily and spiritual associations of the impressions of ordinary life, I began to meditate how to be. So that's just it. With that all purified away, he began to be. Heidegger would be proud. These meditations of my purified reason then made it categorically clear to me that to save the contemporary beings of any of the sacred ways was already too late. So either saving people through cultivating hope or cultivating love or cultivating faith, it's not enough. These meditations, or even all three, it's not enough. These meditations of mine made it categorically clear to me that all the genuine functions proper to man, as they are proper to all three-brained beings of our great universe, had already degenerated in their remote ancestors into other functions. Namely, into functions included among the properties of the organ Kundabuffer, which were very similar to the genuine being functions of faith, love, and hope. So hold on a second. The universe had already degenerated their remote ancestors into other functions, namely into functions included among the properties of the Kundabuffer organ, which were very similar. Okay, so faith, hope, and love, what we call love isn't love, what we call faith isn't faith, and what we call hope isn't hope. Our natural faith, hope, and love that we express are actually functions of the Kundabuffer organ, or the Kundabuffer organ degenerated us so with its properties so that when we express love, it's conditioned. Our faith is conditional. Our hope is conditional. And this degeneration occurred in all probability in consequence of the fact that when the organ Kundabuffer had been destroyed in these ancestors, and they had also acquired in themselves factors for the genuine sacred being impulses, then as the taste of many of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer still remained in them, these properties of the organ Kundabuffer, which resembled these three sacred impulses, became gradually mixed with the latter, with the results that there were crystallized in their psyche the factors for the impulses, faith, love, and hope, which, although similar to the genuine, were nevertheless somehow or another quite distinct. So there, basically what I said. The contemporary three-centered beings here do at times believe love and hope with their reason, as well as with their feelings, but how they believe, how they love, and how they hope. It is exactly in these that all the peculiarity of these three being properties lies. It is exactly in this that all the peculiarity of these three. So if you ask someone what is love, asking different people for what love is betrays something about the peculiarities of their mentation. Same with hope, and same with belief. Interesting. They also believe, but this sacred impulse in them does not function independently, as it does in general in all the three-centered beings existing on the various other planets of our great universe, upon which beings with the same possibilities breed. But it arises dependent upon some or other factors, which have been formed in their common presences, owing as always to the same consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer. As, or instance, the particular properties arising in them, which they call vanity, self-love, pride, self-conceit, and so forth. So, basically, love, hope, and belief. Is he saying that? Oh, so they also believe, but this sacred impulse. So these things get mixed in with love, hope, and faith. And that is effectively, these are what degenerates them. In consequence of this, the three-brained beings here are, for the most part, subject to the perceptions and fixations in their presences of all sorts of synchropusarums. I nailed that. Or, as it is expressed here, they believe any old tale. Yes. It is, yes, they do. If it's all fake news. It's fake news. It is perfectly easy to convince beings of this planet of anything you like, provided only during their perceptions of these fictions there is evoked in them, and there proceeds, either consciously from without or automatically by itself, the functioning of one or another corresponding consequence of the properties of the organ Kundabuffer, crystallized in them from among those that form what is called the subjectivity of the given being, as for instance, self-love, vanity, pride, swagger, imagination, bragging, arrogance, and so on. So basically, you can get someone to believe anything as long as it appeals to something in them, like pride or self-love. So you can get them to believe, hey man, I think you're a reincarnation of Napoleon. I mean, it's just really good, man. You're good at leadership. And it's like, you're appealing to their pride and vanity. He's like, yeah, I think I am. It's this, basically, this is what he's saying. You can get them to believe anything. You can get them to love anything. You can get them to hope for anything, as long as it can. Imagination here as well, like, imagine this. Oh, that sounds interesting. This is what he's kind of getting at. So from the influence of such actions upon their degenerated reason, and on the degenerated factors in their localizations, which factors actualize their being sensations, not only is there crystallized a false conviction concerning the mentioned fictions, but thereafter, in all sincerity and faith, they will vehemently prove to those around them that it is just so, and can in no way be otherwise. Yes. In an equally abnormal form, where data molded in them, or evoking the sacred impulse of love, in the presences of beings of contemporary times, there also arises, and is present in them, as much as you please, of that strange impulse which they call love. But this love of theirs is firstly also the result of certain crystallized consequences of the properties of the same Kundabuffer. Oh my God. And secondly, this impulse of theirs arises manifested itself in the process of every one of them entirely subjectively. So subjectively, and so differently, that if 10 of them were asked to explain how they sensed this inner impulse of theirs, then all 10 of them, if, of course, they were for once replied sincerely, and frankly confessed their genuine sensations, and not those they had read about somewhere or had obtained from somebody else, all 10 would reply differently and describe 10 different sensations. So that's interesting. Wonder what Wittgenstein would say about that. Anyway, one would explain this sensation in the sexual sense, another in the sense of pity, a third in the sense of desire for submission, a fourth in a common craze for outer things, and so on and so forth. But not one of the 10 could describe even remotely the sensation of genuine love. And none of them would, because in none of the ordinary beings, men, here has there ever been for a long time any sensation of the sacred being impulse of genuine love. Hey, Francis of Assisi was a cool dude. And without this taste, they cannot even vaguely describe the most beatific sacred being impulse in the presence of every three-scented being of the whole universe. So that's interesting. Other three-scented beings have something pulsing in them. And it's this element, love, which in accordance with the divine foresight of great nature forms those data in us, from the result of the experiencing of which we can blissfully rest from the meritorious labors actualized by us for the purpose of self-perfection. Here in these times, if one of those three-brained beings loves somebody or other, then he loves him either because the latter always encourages and undeservingly flatters him, or because his nose is much like the nose of that female or male, with whom, thanks to the cosmic law of polarity or type, a relation has been established which has not yet been broken, or finally, so good looking, or finally he loves him only because the latter's uncle is in a big way of business and may one day give him a boost, and so on and so forth. So we'll take congratulations from someone if they know Mr. Beast. Maybe Mr. Beast will come and give me something. Donate to me, Mr. Beast. But never do being men. I'm gonna say beings men just sounds wrong, bro. Being men here love with genuine, impartial, non-egoistic love. Men, am I right, ladies? Now, thanks to this kind of love in the contemporary beings here, their hereditary predispositions to crystallizations of the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabhafa are crystallized at the present time without hindrance and finally become fixed in their nature as a lawful part of them. So thanks to this kind of love, yeah. So because of the degeneration of these three aspects, three factors, hope, love, and faith degenerating, the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabhafa just crystallize and just become fixed in us, and a lawful part of them, so we feel that it's right, and doing otherwise would go against our very sense of being. And as regards the third sacred being impulse, namely essence hope, its plight in the presences of the three-centered beings here is even worse than with the first two. Okay, so we went through belief, love, and now hope, essence hope, true hope, is even worse than the first two. Such a being impulse has not only finally adapted itself in them to the whole of their presences in a distorted form, but this maleficent, strange hope, newly formed in them, which has taken the place of the being impulse of sacred hope, is now already the principal reason why factors can no longer be acquired in them for the functioning of genuine being impulses of faith, love, and hope. Interesting. Okay, well, why is this? In consequence of this newly formed abnormal hope of theirs, they always hope in something, and thereby all those possibilities are constantly being paralyzed in them, which arise in them either intentionally from without or accidentally by themselves, which possibilities could perhaps still destroy in their presence as their hereditary predispositions to the crystallization of the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabhafa. When I returned, so it sounds like hope has degenerated into us in the sense that we hope for things, and that kind of creates an indolence in us. We become paralyzed. So when an impulse arises in us that we should follow, and if we took to the very end may actually eliminate the elements of the Kundabhafa organ in us, we don't follow it because we hope maybe God will just save us. Maybe someone else will save us one day. It's like, no, we become paralyzed by this abnormal hope. When I returned from the mountain Vezeniama to the city of Babylon, I continued my observations in order to make it clear whether it was possible somehow or other to help these unfortunates in some other way. During the period of my year of special observations on all their manifestations and perceptions, I made it categorically clear to myself that although the factors for engendering in their presences the sacred being impulses of faith, hope, and love are already quite degenerated in the beings of this planet, nevertheless, the factor which ought to engender that being impulse on which the whole psyche of beings of a three-brain system is in general based, and which impulse exists under the name of objective conscience, is not yet atrophied in them, but remains in their presences almost in its primordial state. Okay. Conscience. So not consciousness, but a conscience. Something that torments us. What do some people say? It's like your conscience is that which torments you when you don't do what is best. Do what you know is right. Thanks to the abnormally established conditions of external ordinary being existence existing here, this factor has gradually penetrated and become embedded in that consciousness which is here called subconsciousness. So thanks to the abnormal being existence here, this factor as in being conscious, the objective consciousness, has become embedded in our subconsciousness, in consequence of which it takes no part whatever in the functioning of ordinary consciousness. So we have a conscious. Everyone has a conscience, but it takes no part in normal consciousness. It is something subconscious. So we can bring it to consciousness, and maybe in extreme situations we feel regret. We do feel remorse. But some people can bury it. So some people may not have it. It's locked in their subconsciousness. Remorse, metanoia. So, well then, it was just, so wait, subconsciousness in the consequence of which it takes, takes no part in their ordinary consciousness. Well then, it was just then that I indubitably understood, with all the separate ruminating parts representing the whole of my I, that if the functioning of that being factor still surviving in their common presences were to participate in the general functioning of that consciousness of theirs in which they pass their daily, as they were here say, waking existence, only then would it still be possible to save the contemporary three-brained beings here from the consequences of the properties of that organ, which was intentionally implanted into their first ancestors. The consequences of the properties of that organ. Okay. My further meditations then confirmed for me that it would be possible to attain this only if their general being existence were to flow for a long time under foreseeingly corresponding conditions. That it would be possible to attain this only if their general being to flow for a long time under... Okay. To flow for a long time. This is interesting. So there has to be a period where the conscience is released, awakened, and then just operates for a period of time. When all the above mentioned was completely transubstantiated in me, I decided to consecrate the whole of myself from that time on to the creation here of such conditions that the functioning of the sacred conscience still surviving in their subconsciousness might gradually pass into the functioning of their ordinary consciousness. May the blessing of our almighty, omni-loving common Father, uni-being creator, endlessness be upon my decision. Amen. Thus ended the legomenism concerning the deliberations of the very saintly, incomparable Ashyata Shaimash under the title The Terror of the Situation. That wasn't a... Jesus Christ, okay. Jesus Christ, indeed. That was quite a journey. So, my boy, there's another so, my boy. When, as I have already told you, early in my last descent in person onto the surface of your planet, I first became acquainted in detail with this legomenism, which I have just repeated, and had at once become interested in the deductions of this latter most high, very saintly, common, cosmic, individual Ashyata Shaimash, there existed neither any other legomenisms, nor any other sources of information concerning his further very saintly activities among those favourites of yours. So I then decided to investigate in detail and without fail to make clear to myself which were the measures he took and how he subsequently actualized them, in order to help these unfortunates to deliver themselves from the consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabatha, which had passed to them by heredity, and were so maleficent for them. And so, as one of my chief tasks during this last sojourn of mine in person there on the surface of your planet, I made a detailed investigation and elucidation of the whole of the further very saintly activities there among your favorites of the great essence-loving, now most high, very saintly, common, cosmic, individual Ashiata Shaimash. So, okay, let's see Beelzebub's investigations of him. And as regards that marble tablet, which has by chance survived since the time of the very saintly activities of the great Ashiata Shaimash, and is now there the principal sacred relic of the Brotherhood of the Initiates, being called the Brotherhood Olbogmek, I happened to see and read the contents engraved on it during this last sojourn of mine there. During my subsequent elucidations, it turned out that later on, when this very saintly Ashiata Shaimash had established there the particular conditions of ordinary being existence which he had planned, several of these tablets were, on his advice and initiative, set up in corresponding places of many of the large towns, and there were engraved upon them all kinds of sayings and counsels for corresponding existence, but which their big wars later on again began. All these tablets were also destroyed by these strange beings themselves. Only one of them, namely the one now of these brethren, somehow survived. As I have already told you, and is now the property of this brotherhood, on this still surviving marble were inscriptions concerning the sacred being impulses called faith, love, and hope, namely, faith, love, and hope. This is interesting. Faith of consciousness is freedom. Faith of feeling is weakness. Faith of body is stupidity. What are most people nowadays? Most people nowadays think the body is the only thing there is, and the consciousness is just an illusion of brain chemicals. So these people are stupid. Some people have faith in their feelings and emotionality. Their feelings which are in constant flux. One moment's one way, one moment's the other way. It's weak, insipid. But consciousness, faith of consciousness is freedom. Faith in another way can be seen as a type of knowledge as well. So knowledge of consciousness is freedom, the true gnosis. Love of consciousness evokes the same in response. So how do you come to know consciousness? Through love. It evokes the same response. So if you move towards it and it moves towards you and you connect in love. The same way a man and a woman in love connect. Love of feeling evokes the opposite. Baby, please, I love you, marry me. And he says this on the first date and she runs away. Love of the body depends only on type and polarity. So a hot dude and a hot girl get together, have a fling, no strings attached. Hope of consciousness is strength. Hope of feeling is slavery, emotional slavery. Hope of body is disease. It's gonna die, bro. Don't put all your hopes in your body. Although we should use the body and make it healthy. We've got a body, so we may as well use it. Now, before continuing to tell you more about the activities of the very saintly Ashiata Shaimash for the welfare of your favorites, I must, I think, elucidate to you a little more in detail that inner impulse which is called there by your favorites hope, and concerning which the very saintly Ashiata Shaimash constated that the case is worse than with the other two. And the personal observations and investigations I later specially made regarding this said strange impulse present in them clearly showed me that in truth the factors for engendering this abnormal impulse in their presences are most maleficent for them. Thanks to this abnormal hope of theirs, a very singular and most strange disease with a property of evolving arose and exists among them. There even until now a disease there called tomorrow. Yes. This strange disease, tomorrow, brought with it terrifying consequences, and particularly for these unfortunate three-brained beings, there who chance to learn and to become categorically convinced with the whole of their presence, that they possess some very undesirable consequences for the deliverance, from which they must make certain efforts, and which efforts, moreover, they even know just how to make, but owing to this maleficent disease tomorrow, they never succeed in making these required efforts. I'll always do it tomorrow. All of the books I've ever written exist in the bookshelf of tomorrow. All of the paintings I've ever painted are hung in the gallery of tomorrow, and no one will ever see them. And this is just the maleficent part of all the great terrifying evil, which, owing to various causes great and small, is concentrated in the process of the ordinary being existence of these pitiable three-brained beings, and by putting off from tomorrow till tomorrow those unfortunate beings there who do by chance learn all about what I have mentioned, are also deprived of the possibility of ever attaining anything real. So even if you have perfect understanding, you can still get screwed over by this indolence, by the perverted hope, which calls to you, whispers in your ear and says, just do it tomorrow. This strange, and for your favorites, maleficent disease tomorrow has already become a hindrance for the beings of contemporary times, not only because they have been totally deprived of all possibilities of removing from their presences the crystallized consequences of the properties of the organ Kundabhafa, but it had also become a hindrance to most of them in honestly discharging at least those being obligations of theirs which have become quite indispensable in the already established conditions of ordinary being existence. What does that mean? Good God. Let me just read that again. God damn it, Gurdjieff. This strange and for your favorites maleficent disease tomorrow has already become a hindrance for the beings of contemporary times, not only because they have been totally deprived of all possibilities, so that your possibilities never actualize because of tomorrow, i.e. hope, of removing from their presences the crystallized consequences of the organ. So we're never going to remove the consequence of the organ Kundabhafa because of tomorrow, but it had also become a hindrance to them, most of them in honestly discharging at least those being obligations of theirs which have become quite indispensable in the already established conditions of ordinary being existence. So even starting a business is done tomorrow. So we don't even get our planetary bodies in order. I'll take the medicine tomorrow. I'll start my workout routine tomorrow. Thanks to the disease tomorrow, the three-brained beings there, particularly the contemporary ones, almost always put off till later everything that needs to be done at the moment, being convinced that later they will do better and more. Procrastination is the devil, is Satan. Owing to the said maleficent disease tomorrow, most of these unfortunate beings there who accidentally, or owing to a conscious influence from without, become aware through their reason in them of their complete nullity, and begin to sense it with all their separate spiritualized parts, and who also chance to learn which and in what way being efforts must be made in order to become such as it is proper for three-brained beings to be, also, by putting off from tomorrow till tomorrow, almost all arrive at the point that on one sorrowful day for themselves they arise in them and begin to be manifest those forerunners of old age called feebleness and infirmity, which are the inevitable lot of all cosmic formations, great and small, toward the end of their completed existence. Here I must without fail tell you also about that strange phenomena which I constated there during my observations and studies of the almost entirely degenerated presences of those favourites of yours. Namely, I definitely constated that in many of them, toward the end of their planetary existence, most of the consequences of the properties of that same organ, which had become crystallized in their common presences, began to atrophy of their own accord, and some of them even entirely disappear. Hold on a second, I definitely considered many of them that toward the end of their planetary existence, most of the consequences of the properties of the same organ, in consequence of these beings, begin to see and sense reality a little better. So old age is a time when you weaken and become feeble, but side effect of that is it also enfeebles the properties of the organ Kunde buffer, and you are actually able to see reality better because of this. In such cases, a strong desire appears in the common presences, in such favorites of yours, to work upon themselves, as they say, for the salvation of their soul. But needless to say, nothing can result from such desires of theirs just because it is already too late for them. The time given them for this purpose by great nature having already passed, and although they see and feel the necessity of actualizing the required being efforts, yet for the fulfillment of such desires of theirs, they have now only ineffectual yearnings and the lawful infirmities of old age. Oof, that would suck. Imagine knowing what to do, truly seeing what you need to do, and having the motivation to do it, but then you can't do it. Just because you can't lift your arm, you can't lift your legs anymore, you're too feeble. Ooh. And so, my boy, my researches and investigations concerning the further activities of the very saintly Ashyata Shaimash for the welfare of the three-brained beings arising and existing on this planet of yours eventually made the following clear to me. When this great, and by his reason, almost incomparable sacred individual became fully convinced of the ordinary sacred ways, yeah, big oof, says Tyler, big oof, ways which exist for the purpose of self-perfection for all the three-brained beings of the universe, were no longer suitable for the beings of this planet. He then, after his year of special observation and studies of their psyche, again ascended to that same mountain, Vezinyama, and during several terrestrial months contemplatively pondered in which way he could actualize his decision, that is, to save the beings of this planet from those hereditary predispositions to the crystallizations of the consequences of the properties of the organ Kunde buffer, by means of those data which survived in their subconscious for the fundamental sacred being impulse conscience. These ponderings of his then first of all fully convinced him that through it were indeed possible to save them by means of the data which survived in their common presences. For engendering this sacred being impulse, nevertheless, it would only be possible if the manifestations of these data which survived in their subconsciousness were to participate without fail in the functioning of that consciousness of theirs under the direction of which their daily waking existence flows, and furthermore, if this being impulse were to be manifested over a long period through every aspect of this consciousness of theirs. So he needs to awaken consciousness in people and have it flow through them for a long period. So how does he get them to do it? 27, the organization for man's existence created by the very saintly Ashyata Shaimash. We'll have to save this till next week. We're already over an hour here, hour and a half. So thank you all for staying along. We got 2 chapters done today. Oh my god, it's been a long time since we've done a multi-chapter live stream. Anyway, thanks for joining me. I'll see y'all next week. Once again, if you want to help support the channel, please give a donation, one-time donation, PayPal, or try giving something through the Coffee account. And there's also YouTube memberships. Thank you very much, and I'll see y'all next time. Ciao.